Hey, everybody. Welcome back or welcome to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. And I am your host today. My name is Ethan Nash. And boy, do we have a treat for you today. This episode is with Mark C. Crowley, and I'll give him a proper introduction here in just a moment. But Mark is a terrific human being, first and foremost, and we had an amazing conversation here. We really dig into some, I think, fundamental principles for managers to keep in mind around what it takes to actually create employee well-being. And what we'll get into today is that this isn't just, a nice to have, right? That it's kind of a nice, good thing to create well-being in our employees. Of course, it's that too, but it's actually fundamental to building the type of productive, high-performing teams that we want to build. And it's also just the right thing to do as a human being, which we talk a lot about today. This episode, we're going to get deep. Mark's going to share some vulnerable stories, and I am confident you are going to walk away with some practical takeaways and some things that you can start doing immediately to grow, to improve as a leader, and grow into a leader in which you're even more and more showing up in a way that creates employee engagement and well-being in those that you manage. So Mark C. Crowley, who is Mark C. Crowley? So Mark is a speaker. He's a consultant and author of the Lead from the Heart, Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century, and his newest book, The Power of Employee Well-Being, Moving Beyond Engagement to Build Flourishing Teams. And this is the book that we talk about today. And boy, is it a good book. His mission is to fundamentally change how we lead people in workplaces around the globe. Mark is a regular columnist for Fast Company Magazine and Psychology Today. His work has been published in Inc., USA Today, Reuters, Forbes, the Stanford Social Innovation Review, the Huffington Post, Gallup, the Financial Times, and the Seattle Times. You might have heard of some of those publications before. In other words, he's kind of a pretty big deal. All right, so Lead from the Heart, again, one of his, I think his first book, has been taught in 11 American universities, and 2 universities have already added the power of employee well-being to their curricula. His Lead from the Heart podcast ranked in the top 1.5% of all podcasts in the world, and has it in an audience in 175 countries. All right, folks. You're going to enjoy this episode, so tune in and have a good time. Well, hey, Mark, before I give you a chance to talk here, I'm just going to steal the mic, and I just want to start by saying this. This book that you've written here, as I was thinking about it, I realized that this is kind of the book I've been waiting for somebody to write. I didn't even really I didn't fully know I knew I was waiting for somebody to write this book. The book, I mean, it's clear, it's grounded in research. Your insights to word count is outstanding. I think I read it in probably 3 hours, but I'm a slow reader and I was taking a bunch of notes and things like that. And but I got a tremendous amount out of it. And I think our listeners are going to love this book. It mirrors so much of what we talk about on this podcast and in our leadership development trainings. I mean, you talk about leading with care, leading with respect, belonging, personal growth, self-reflection, emotional IQ, emotional maturity, but you really give it a really fresh new framing in this book. So anyways, I just want to say thank you for gifting the world this book. And thanks for giving me and our listeners your time, Mark. So I appreciate it.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for that. That's lovely. My best friend in life once told me that hard writing makes easy reading. So,
Yeah, it reminds me of that quote. Who knows who said it? Einstein or Mark Twain. They seem to have 80% of the quotes out there attributed
Winston
to them.
Churchill is
Winston
like
Churchill. Yes.
I'm guessing the quote. but
Yeah, right. They're like, sorry, I wrote you a long letter. I ran out of time.
yep,
So
yeah,
you took the opportunity to really, I think, just pull out exactly what we need to know and need to hear on this concept. So, anyways, I'll also just say here, just to continue with a bit more flattery, your podcast is fantastic. I've just listened to a few episodes at this point, but leading from the heart, that's correct. Leading from the heart.
lead from the heart.
Hmm.
I think you can
So
see it behind me, the blue.
oh, there it is.
There you
Yep.
go. That's the
Yeah, we'll link to your podcast and all your work in our show notes. And listeners, go listen to his podcast. I mean, you're only allowed to listen to his podcast as long as you keep listening to the Manager with Mind
exactly.
podcast as well.
It's only fair.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, I'm babbling on here. Mark, how are you? And how are you? How are you really?
That's an inside joke. I'll leave that to the to people to go find out what that meant in the book. But thank you very much. I'm actually good. I'm good, and so I can answer that question twice. No bad news to share. Things are good. So I appreciate your asking.
Yeah. And I actually, if you don't mind, I want to take that inside joke and make it an outward joke here. But I actually I really like that section of the book. And why is that phrase meaningful to you? The how are you really?
Well, okay, so we'll tell the real story. I was speaking a few years ago at General Dynamics Information Technology right outside of Washington, D.C.
Mm,
And when I travel east, if I'm not going to stay for a long time, I try to stay on West Coast time. And I usually wake up around 4:30, so that's 7:30. I was thinking about 9 and I'm right across the street. So I figured if I just wake up at my normal time, I can stay on California time and be fine with that. But the alarm hadn't gone off and I was laying in bed and I started getting anxious. Like, am I late? And
mm,
so I picked up the phone and realized that I wasn't late, but there was a message from the coroner's office in San Diego saying that my older brother had died and that
mm,
they needed to notify me because he died alone. And obviously, this was shocking news. I had no idea that he was sick or that was even a potential. And I was going to be speaking a half an hour later. So I
mm,
had to make a decision, do I go in front of 400 people and just say, I'm sorry, I can't come, or don't go, or what do I do? And I decided I'm just going to go do it, give them my best. I came all the way here, and then I'll go home and deal with my brother's loss. And so I did a mini meeting with about 50 people where we were just talking for about an hour. And then I went into the grand session with about 400 of their managers. And the CEO brought me up on stage and asked me the question, how are you, Mark? And of course, I've already done a workshop, for an hour. So I'm like, I'm getting through this.
mm,
And I said, I'm doing great. And she said, how are you really?
mm.
And it hit me. I can't, I'll just say it, I can't bullshit my way through this. I'm like, I have to tell her what's really going on. And so I said, well, I don't know what provoked you to ask that. It turns out it's her natural process. She does this
Mm.
to everybody. But for me, it felt personal. And I revealed I just lost my brother. And, I'm sort of dealing with that and sort of got teary and a little emotional. And the people were just wonderful. But in the moment, I realized this is something I'm going to do forever
Mm.
because people give you the brave face and everything's great. And, you know, when you really ask them what's happening to them, they're going to reveal something a little bit deeper that you can actually access and help people with. If they say, "Hey, my kid's doing badly in school," you can have a conversation about that and say, "He's going to be okay. You know that, right? You're going to be all right. He's just a little stumble for," like, just give people a little bit of a response that you would never have had if you hadn't asked that question. So that's why it's in the book. I just think it's a very powerful thing to do to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I was glad you included that, and I think that's more towards the end of the book. So I'm starting kind of at the back here, but yeah, I found that. I mean, first off, thanks for sharing that with us, and yeah, I found that a powerful section of the book, and just it was a really powerful takeaway for me. Of, I mean, how often do we walk around just saying, how's it going? How are you? And we all have these canned responses. Um, but just that question, how are you really? It just shows a deeper sense of curiosity in somebody.
A
And
sincere form of curiosity, right?
sincere.
We
Yeah.
don't really want to know how you doing. Good. Okay, let's get to it.
Right.
It's like it's like, why do we even ask people how are you doing? Because we're not listening. We've got
Mhm.
our agenda and we're going to go to our agenda. And it's just, for a CEO to demonstrate that I'm going to take a moment to find out how you're really doing before we get to brass tacks
Yeah.
shows that she's more interested in the people than, or equivalently interested in people as much as whatever work projects they're there to talk about. We've all gone into meetings. It's like, okay, people, let's go, and there's no interest in what's going on with people. And they don't even think it matters, but it matters a lot because we used to think, leave your troubles at the door, like
You're right.
wherever that ridiculous line came from. Like people can't stop thinking about their elderly parent or their sick child or their argument they had with their wife or what, I mean, all these things that they're bringing into these meetings. And if you could just say, how you doing? And like, oh, I'd rather not discuss it, but I'm not having a great day. Okay. We're all here for you. And
Yeah.
just lift people up a little bit, get people back into a positive state. That's, big part of what well-being is about.
Absolutely. And I appreciate how you frame that. It's not necessarily about intruding into someone's life that they don't want you intruding in, but just even the recognition that, hey, if you need anything, let us know or let me know. If you want to talk about this more, let me know. I'll just say that I actually tried that question with one of my direct reports in a one-on-one the other week, just saying, hey, how are you? How are you really? And it opened up a really cool discussion. So anyway,
It always
thank you for
does.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. Good.
Well, hey, I want to just maybe start at the beginning with a little context here. So, you and our listeners have heard this stat as well, but you talk about how Gallup engagement scores. They've been measuring engagement for a long time now, but engagement has been stuck around, I think, 31% since 2013. Um, they report that nearly 1 in 5 employees are actively disengaged. And you make an interesting point that, managers are rarely evaluated or compensated on engagement. And this is a drum that we've been banging for a long time now is like, you really want engagement, you get more of what you measure and what you reward. But I guess my question here is, um, I mean, it seems like you are arguing that we've been measuring the wrong thing by focusing on engagement. And instead of engagement, we should be focused on employee well-being. So I just want to allow you to kind of make the case here. Why well-being is the thing we should be.
It's interesting because I'm just listening to you, and I think it's the what I'm really saying is that measuring engagement theoretically made sense. Now, you just pointed out nobody ever took it seriously. CEOs never did. There was never any accountability. It was never on any manager's scorecard. And so, engagement was just fluff.
Mhm.
Survey people, don't do anything with the feedback. So the whole thing has been a mess. We've never committed to it. So if nothing ever came to replace it, I'd still be sitting here and going, this is stupid. Either commit to it or stop talking about it,
Right,
right?
right.
It directionally, it's a good idea to be paying attention to this because there's clear evidence that it would support better performance. But if you're just going to give it lip service and window dressing and insincerity that people can feel, they resent it. So stop it.
Mhm, mhm,
However, really what I've come to realize is that there's just a simpler, better way of getting to the same answer, which
mm.
is to evaluate well-being. So to give you an example,
Yeah.
we do these 12 questions. So Gallup has 12 questions. So one of them is, do you have the proper equipment and work materials to do your job effectively? And another one is, do you have a good friend at work?
Mhm.
So I get my engagement scores. My engagement says it's low. Do I go and get Ethan a new computer or do I help you find a friend? So right out of the gate, we've got too much haziness around what is it that we need to fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if you need a computer. I don't know if you need a friend. And there's 10 other questions. It's too messy. So what well-being does, by the way, there's research that shows there's a direct connection. Direct, not indirect, not imputed the way engagement is.
Mm.
Engagement has always been, what we have found is that engaged teams look like this. So we believe that they're connected. There's research that shows that there's a direct connection, like week to week performance improves when people are expressing high well-being and declines when it's not. So if you understand that, then
Mm.
you go, okay, then we should be paying attention to that. However, there's one other nuance of this that is so important, which is you don't need to, by the way, managers go, hey, we're going to be doing our engagement surveys. We're going to be asking about, 12 questions that Gallup gave us.
Mm.
And somebody in HR goes, oh, well, can we ask them about, are they okay with the parking? Are they okay with the cafeteria? And, do they like the Taco Tuesdays? And so all of a sudden you're asking people 40 questions and it just becomes sort of like, well, this is interesting. They don't like Taco Tuesdays. Oh, well, like you've lost sight of what it is that you were trying to measure in the first place. And then we only measure it once a year and or twice a year at best. And so the manager, if there is any accountability, they get the feedback and it says your team isn't happy. And my manager, didn't give me a raise when I asked for it, and I've worked really hard. I'm the manager and I'm reading the reviews and I'm like, that happened 9 months ago. Like
Right.
that's,
Right.
so there's all this wiggle room with it. Where I think we need to go is to ask one or two questions on a regular basis, different questions, but a regular basis. So if I just set out to you and said, please just grade your well-being, how you felt at the overall work week this past week. How did you
Mm.
feel at work? On a scale of 5 to 1, either bright green to light green to orange to red to bright red, being very happy to very unhappy, where
Mm.
would you put yourself? Just ask that. And what I mean, this sounds so simple, but this is what an economist at Oxford did. And what he found was that the productivity went up when people were in the green and went down in the red. But you
Mm.
could then ask people, how, on a scale of 5 to 1, 1 to 5, how would you describe the support and care that you receive from your manager? Do you feel personally known? Do you feel respected? Just ask that simple question. And
Mm.
if you're looking at it across organizations, you can see where people are getting low ratings. And you have an opportunity then to go to that manager and say, hey, you're maybe achieving your goals, but you're doing it in the wrong way. You're harming your people. So, what do we have to do to elevate your skill set, your practices, so that we can improve well being? We've never done this with engagement. So
Mm.
nobody's scores ever went up. No company scores. I mean, literally from 2013 to 25, the scores are the same. So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, we have enough evidence here that that didn't work. Can we all agree? What's really funny is I've written articles about this, and of course, the introduction to my book is saying this. But people are so vested in it. If like they think they've been doing something meaningful, and so I'm saying, well, that was no longer meaningful, and they're like acting like I'm taking something away from them, and I'm
Mm.
not. Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, you know what? That project you worked on for the last 2 straight years, well, we don't need that anymore, and that was never really important. You're like, well, I gave 2 years of my life to that. Like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
can understand how they feel. I'm not saying that it wasn't meaningful. I'm saying focus on this instead. Take it to the next level is really what I'm saying, because it's just simpler, easier, and more direct, more timely, and more impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And that was really my takeaway is focusing on well-being, as you put it, is just the more direct way to do it. And I take your point about people kind of doubling and tripling down on engagement and engagement. It's like sunken cost fallacy here. We've already invested so much
Exactly.
into this, right?
That's it.
This would
I'm
be
going to use
terrible if I
that.
was wrong after all these years, you know?
Sunken cost fallacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Completely right.
I actually want to zoom in on the Oxford study you mentioned here because it's not a small study. I mean, if I remember, it's they surveyed 20 million workers in this study here. Can you share a little bit more about the study, or is what you already shared kind of the
So,
crux of
well,
it?
no. Well, I mean, I'll just tell you the basics of it. What they did was they went into a telecom. It was a British telecom. So this happened in Great Britain, and it was a like a service center. So
Mm,
everybody had the same job, everybody had the same responsibilities, everybody had the same goals, same metrics, same rewards. Perfect place to do a study like this. And they simply asked people to grade their sense of well-being at the end of every week. And then they went and looked at their key performance metrics and were able to determine that collectively, when the all of them, the
mm,
team itself of call center workers, were feeling that their well-being was high, that their productivity went up in all measures. So
mm.
like this, if you're a leader and you're looking for the holy grail, this is it. Like, just take care of your people and you're going to get better performance. It's really that simple, right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me about this, and I went to Oxford a year ago in December and actually met with the
Mm,
person that did the research. And the thing that I loved about it was that they gave people the benefit of the doubt. So they didn't say, "Hey, Ethan, we want you to evaluate your feelings of well-being this past week at work, but I know you got, you know, some financial problems, and I know you got an elderly parent, and maybe you've got marital problems. I've heard about all these things, but could you take those out? Like, could you, like, right? They didn't do that. They basically just said, tell us what your experience was of well-being at work. And
mm,
people could say, my divorce has nothing to do with this. My financial problems have nothing to do with this. So they were able to get fair and honest feedback from people on a consistent basis. People just basically said, this is where I feel I was at the end of this week at work.
mm,
And so, but there's other portions of this that I love, which is that if you go out to people and you say, um, do you feel that you work for a caring manager on a scale of 1 to 5? All of a sudden you can rank your managers on how people feel about working for them.
mm.
And one of the, this is in the book, but Gallup has shown they have a book cleverly called "It's the Manager," and
Right.
they call it that because they've attributed 70% of engagement is driven by the experience people have with their boss. So
Mhm.
I've imputed, if that's true for engagement, it has to be true for well-being. There's no question, right?
Absolutely.
So really, there's no organizational culture that's going to offset a manager who's toxic or uncaring, unsupportive, doesn't want to, see you grow, doesn't want to see you thrive, doesn't really care about, when you turn off, and makes you always be on, manages with fear and intimidation. So if we want well-being, really we have to go after the managers. We have to make sure that they're balancing, you actually called this mind and heart, which I loved.
Yeah.
It's, you've got the drive, you've got to hit your goals. That's what leadership is about. We're here to achieve something. But that doesn't mean that you have to have, people be collateral damage. It doesn't mean that they have to go home every night and drink themselves to sleep so they can come back the next day because they're just beaten up so badly and the experience of work is so horrible. And
Mhm.
so if you have 40 managers in your company and you're doing these surveys on a regular basis and you're asking these questions consistently, you can go back and you can go, hey, Bill, we've done this now over the last 6 months. We've asked the same question, and 3 times your people are saying that they're very unhappy working for you. So
Mhm.
we need to do something about this. We're going to put you on a performance plan. We're going to coach you. We're going to give you opportunities to learn, read this book, whatever.
Mm.
But you're accountable for this so that nobody ever has to work for somebody like that again.
Yeah.
That's my dream.
I love that. And you're certainly preaching to the choir here. And I know that our listeners, I mean, so you brought up care, right? And I appreciate that you included this in your book. I mean, listeners on this podcast will be familiar with, we talk about our top 15 management skills, and we always say, of these 15 management skills, none of these are any rank order except for number one, which is show care and respect. Like, it's actually the skill and the most important skill. A survey we cite is from the Lyman Institute, but they found that when employees feel cared about, 60% plan to stay at their company for at least 3 years. 90% are likely to recommend their organization as a great place to work. 94% say they feel personally engaged in their work. And the real kicker for me is 94% say they have well being in their life when they feel cared about by their manager. And so, like, this is above all, like, the most important skill in my view that
Well,
man.
I'm going to confirm it because
Yeah.
15 in July, you can see I don't know if you can see there's the red book, but the red one
Mhm.
is the first edition of Lead from the Heart, which came out in July of 2011, and that's the premise. And I've proved it scientifically that what people are looking for. The thing is that historically people went to work for money. And we went to work for money for one reason. We needed to provide for our basic needs of food and shelter for ourselves and for our family.
Sure.
And so whatever job we took it for that reason. And so there was never a value exchange of expecting anything more than better pay if I do good work, a bonus if I do good work. And from a ownership standpoint, you lose your job if you don't work hard, right?
Right.
So people could go to work every day in jobs that they didn't like and be managed in a way that they didn't like, but they did it because they had to meet their basic needs. And we've gotten to a point where the majority of people, that's not to say everyone, certainly not, but most people now are meeting their basic needs. And Maslow's hierarchy basically said that you have food, shelter, water, safety as being the bottom, the sort of the foundation of the pyramid. But
Mm.
what most people don't know is he also said that you don't ascend in the pyramid, remembering, self actualization being at the top, that you don't go any higher until those basic needs are met.
Mhm.
So it's really been in the last generation that most people have gotten to a point where their basic needs are met. They can afford a house to live in, they have food. And so they're looking around and they're saying, well, I need more from work than my parents expected or my grandparents expected. I
Mhm.
want to do meaningful work. I want to do something that's going to fulfill me. I want to know that I matter. I want to be appreciated. I want to be taught things. I want to grow. All of those things, they come down to feeling valued, and that has to come from the leader.
Mhm.
And so it's a match to what people's needs are, whether they realize them or not. They go to work every day looking for somebody to say, I see your potential. I want to grow you. I want to teach you. I want to help you. Great job on this. I want to appreciate you. Tell me about what your dreams are and
Mhm.
aspirations. All of that is care. So that's the premise of Lead from the Heart, is that people respond to this and we respond to it through reciprocity, meaning I'm so grateful to you for giving me that care that I
Mhm.
want to care back. This is
Yeah.
human nature. So
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
I'm in agreement.
Yeah, yeah. And you just referred to what we talk about as the psychological contract, which is the more that I feel are invested in me relationally, the more willing I am to invest back into the relationships that I have here, into the work, into kind of volunteering my mind and heart, as Stephen Covey
It's
would say.
hardwired into us to do
Yeah,
that as long as it's sincere.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
we all have bullshit detectors, and if we think that somebody's trying to use this as a manipulation, we can shut it down pretty quickly. So if you don't love people, I write about this in the book too. It's like, don't go into leadership, because if you don't really care, you can't fake this.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. So I went into reading your book kind of expecting things like, I don't know, tactical guidance, right? I was already primed to thinking about he's going to talk about, perks and, incentive or recognition programs and things like that. But very early on in the book and really throughout, you take the reader on an inward journey in a sense. Like you start with self-awareness, know thyself. Why start there in a book about employee well-being?
Well, it goes back to what we were just talking about this idea that, at least 70% of how people feel at work and their well being is driven by their experience with their manager.
Mm.
What I have found is that somebody that I trust and know for a long time once said to me that most people are operating out of their childhood selves.
Mm.
all the time. And it's all under the hood. So it's not like we're consciously thinking about our 7-year-old self, but we all had formative experiences, some worse than others, right? But our parents may have been demanding or ignored us or overpraised us, or whatever experience we had. We may have had death in the family, we may have moved a lot, we may have had neglect, we may have had financial issues, alcoholic parents, I mean, all kinds of experiences in those 18 years. And we really don't realize how much of that influences us.
Mm.
And also what happens is, so let's say that you have a brother, and your brother Tom is always critical of you, calling you stupid and telling you that, that you're the weak link in the family,
Mm.
and that the way you see the world isn't the way everybody else sees the world. So you're kind of a loser in your brother Tom's
Mm.
version, right? So now you're 35 years old, you're in a meeting and you're presenting something, and your boss says to you, I don't think you really get this, all right, Ethan. I don't think you really understand what we're trying to do
Mm.
here. You're not gonna respond to your boss, you're gonna respond to Tom, and you're going to be pissed off about it because it's triggering something inside of you that goes back 25 years that you resented, that is still influencing our behavior. And so what I'm saying is, take a good look at this and just start to think about, what are the drivers, what could be. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
And in Lead from the Heart, I explain in the preface of the book that my mom died when I was very young, and my father was having an affair with a woman while she was dying. He ended up marrying her,
Mm.
and then the two of them just abused me mercilessly, emotionally and psychologically, until they kicked me out of the house at 18 with no money and support. And I was on my own from that point forward. And so, but my father was always telling me that I would never amount to anything, and that, that I was this abject loser. And so I kind of figured out that all the way into my late 40s, that I excelled in my career. Everywhere I went, my teams did well. Part of it was driven because I loved my people and I cared about them, and that really responded. People responded to that. But in terms of my own work days, I was a workaholic in the definition. If you go to Wikipedia, you'll see my photograph. It's that. And and the same person who said most people are operating out of their childhood selves said it in the context. She said, you've spent most of your career proving to a ghost that you have value and worth. And I realized that, like, it was never enough for me. Whatever successes I
Mm.
had was like, okay, good, I can climb the next ladder, literally and figuratively, right? I was always up for another challenge. Give me something bigger, give me some. And I always succeeded, but I was also sacrificing a big part of myself because I was motivated to prove to my father, who wasn't even in my life, by the way, wasn't even alive for most of it at this
Mm.
point, right? But once I understood it, was like, I'm not going to be motivated by that anymore. I wish I'd known that a long time ago. So the
Mm.
sooner we understand what our triggers are. So going back to that meeting, your boss says to you, Ethan, you don't really understand. You might feel the same thing that your brother Tom did to you, but you're not going to react to it. You're going to go, okay, I know what this is about. This wasn't true then, it wasn't true now. And I go, hey boss, this was my understanding. Tell me where I missed, where I misinterpreted, and we'll take it from there. As opposed to being defensive and shutting down or being angry. And these things can derail us because we don't realize how much they're influencing us. So bottom line, I'm saying, figure out who you are, know what your values are, what it is that you get up in the morning thinking, and where your belief systems came from. Because the things, as I gave you this example of my father, there are things that helped us endure or get through certain circumstances when we're young. Like for me, being persistent and resilient and hardworking was really important for me to climb out of what I was given and the hole that I was put into.
Mm.
But once you get out of the hole, you don't have to keep digging, right? Why do you have to keep digging? And that's really, just thinking about this for the first time, but that's really what I'm saying is that if you take a good look at them, you can say, well, I don't really need that anymore. I need something different. I need a different belief system that matches up to who I really am today.
Yeah. All your behaviors and your beliefs, I mean, they were useful at some point is what I'm hearing you say, right? They're
Yeah,
adaptive, and the
correct.
reality of growing wisdom and improving wisdom is recognizing when these adaptive behaviors are no longer serving you in your current context. And
Correct.
that's the
I mean,
work.
you go to a doctor and the doctor goes, "Hey, you've got an infection, so I'm going to give you, an antibiotic." And assuming antibiotics have an endless supply, you just keep taking them until one day you go to the doctor and the doctor goes, "Hey, I'm looking at your blood and you're very ill.
Mhm.
What have you been doing?" "I don't know." "Well, there's a lot of, antibiotic in your system. Is there any explanation?" "Well, I thought when I was sick that, that I was supposed to take this and it would help me. So I figured maybe it would help prevent an illness. So I just kept taking it."
Yeah.
Well, that's stupid, right? But this is what we do, and I don't mean it to be critical. It just means
No.
that we just get into routine and behaviors, and we don't look at them. And if you stop and go, "Should I be taking this any longer?" Probably not. I'm healthy now, right? It's not meant to be a permanent thing. And so, if we spend the time to do that, you used the word reflection earlier. If you do that reflection, you come to some understandings of, okay, time to pivot, go in a different direction. And you don't necessarily be critical of yourself and go, "Why did I do that? Why did I?" I mean, I could have said, "I can't believe I carried my father on my back for all this time." I did for about a day, and then I was like, "Okay, just let it go, just
Mhm.
stop doing it." So now I'm not motivated by that. I'm motivated by different things, and it's a much healthier place to be. And
Mm.
so the connection is, this is a long way of getting there,
Mm.
but if I'm offended by any, so my employee comes in, I'm playing you now. My employee comes in and goes, "Well, I don't think you really understood what I was asking." Now I'm going back to my brother Tom and I'm like, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Now I'm getting mad at my employee
Yeah.
because I'm reflecting on an experience of Tom. And if I haven't worked through that and I don't realize that Tom is being my driver here, people are going to go, "Jesus, all I was asking was, did you understand?" You know what I mean? It's like we I hope this is becoming clear here, is that all of this is underneath us. And if we bring it to the surface and look at it and decide what we want to take forward, we're in a much healthier place to be, a much more self-secure place to be with our employees. And when people feel safe around us, they're going to do better work. But if they feel we're going to be volatile around them when they bring us a problem or they make a mistake, they're going to steer clear of it. They're going to, like, "I can't bring Mark anything like that because he's going to get angry and he's going to get upset." Them not knowing that I'm referring to, a 25-year-old experience that I had with my brother where he used to pick on me because he didn't think I was smarter. He was just being a jerk, right?
Mhm.
Just I hope this is clear because we
Yeah.
covered a lot of ground.
I I mean, I think it's super clear. I mean, even just to take one example that you alluded to, it's like w- you know one of the best ways to lose trust and respect with your employees is to be defensive when they bring you feedback, right? And they're not going to feel cared about, they're not going to feel respected, and the idea here is we got to be able to examine our behaviors in that through that lens, right? Our what not only recognizing that we get defensive, but start to unpack maybe why we have a defensive response. And that's just one example of a behavior we have to look into that could potentially be harming the well-being of those that we manage and those that report to us.
Well, I talk about this experiment that I've done now many times, but it's a wonderful way of eliciting blind spots. Like, what am I missing that other people see about me that I might want to fix before it becomes a derailer?
Yeah.
And people get derailed in their careers. They either stop growing, they don't get promoted anymore because everybody sees the limitations, or they flame out because they've got some fatal flaw that they never dealt with. And a lot of times people are like, they want to keep their heads buried because they just assume not know what it is. So
Mhm.
they don't ask. But I did this exercise years ago where we sat around in a room and we gave the HR business partner gave us all a couple of index cards
Mm.
and said, for every person in this room, write two things that you admire about them that you think is, spectacular about them.
Mm.
And then they would read them. So in a room of 10 people, you would hear 18 pieces of praise of, I think Ethan is great at this. I think Ethan's great at this. Ethan shows me this. I saw him do this. It's like pretty satisfying experience to hear your peers praise you this way because they wouldn't normally do it. But then she tricked us. She says, I'm giving you one card. Now, write on there one thing that you think that they don't know about themselves that if they did and they fixed it would make them an infinitely better leader. And
Mm,
for me, the answer was that I was sarcastic. I could be sarcastic. And that specifically, my sarcasm could at times be hurtful.
mm,
And so this is another thing that I took from my father. Like instantly when they said it, I was like, geez, like it's the last thing in the world because my father was so sarcastic that I would never want that to be like how people
mm,
saw me. So I was really upset with myself. But I also realized that I was emulating as a self-defense mechanism, somebody I'm feeling threatened by or something, or I just want to be critical of. I would use sarcasm like, do you believe that guy or whatever?
mm,
And but it was almost instantaneous where I was just like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. Like I just stopped being, but if it hadn't been for that exercise, I would have continued to be this heart-led leader who was using sarcasm
mm,
that where you're confusing people. It's like, well, why would he be sarcastic and mean if he really cares about us? So if you can remove that as a limitation,
mm,
you're in a much better place in terms of your influence with people because you're taking away this negative thing that they don't want to be around.
mm.
And so asking people how I might get better is a very important way, an effective way. And again, the reason we don't do it is because it feels like a punch in the stomach when somebody goes, well, you don't do this very well, or you haven't done this, or I don't really see you thinking strategically, and we never know where we're going. And, people are like, oh, why did I ask you? But
Yeah,
if you're mature about it and you recognize that every leader has something that they're not effective at, and you just go, that's just mine, that's my problem, I'll fix my problem, you're going to do the work that 99% of managers don't want to do.
totally.
And that's how you get ahead.
Totally, totally. And this seems like the perfect time to bring in the concept of self-compassion, which is, in my view, and I think you would agree based on what I read in the book, is a key component of actually making the growth and change that you need to make. Self this practice of self-compassion of being able to, hey, when you go through a setback or you hear something that's not very flattering about yourself, right? When you receive that hard feedback that just kind of hits you in your core, it's this practice of just recognizing that, hey, we all have things to work on, right? Talking to yourself like you would a close friend. Hey, it's okay. Nobody's perfect. There's other good things about me. And recognizing it's a shared part of the human experience to not be perfect at everything. And, this is something I'm always trying to drive home with people and myself is like, you really want to grow. You have to take self compassion as a conscious practice. And I don't know, do you have any more words of wisdom about self compassion?
Yeah, I mean, I actually words of wisdom you can judge, but I have a very big experience with this. So again grew up with nothing. I didn't get the "you're an impressive kid." I never heard those words, right? I never heard, wow, all the different things you do. You have so much potential. I love you. I love, all about you. I heard the opposite. And also the bigger one was like as I look back on my childhood, I had a paper route when I was 10. Like, like I'm delivering papers in the snow 6 days a week and had that responsibility. I
Yeah.
was in the choir, I was an altar boy, I was an athlete, did well in school. So, any parent would look at that and go, the kid's got ambition, the kid's got initiative, he's got responsibility, he's got talent. And I never heard any of that. So, um, what in my adult life, I basically was massively self-critical. Even my wife says to me, even to this day, why do you need to be so self-critical? And my joke is, if I'm not, who will be? And her
Mm,
joke is, no one should be. Like
mm,
you should. And
yes.
so there's a when I was starting to write Lead from the Heart 15 years ago, I'd never written a book before, and because of the voice in my father's voice of, what I'm hearing when I'm starting to write this book is, you're not a writer, you're not an author, nobody's going to want to hear what you have to say. Who are you to do this? Like, it was oppressive. And so I'm having to figure out, how do I unwind even all those years later, right? He's dead, but I'm hearing it. And I had the same friend that has guided me. I said, well, why would I be like hearing his voice now? And she said, well, there's just certain things that you believed you could do in your career, but writing a book was something that was like stardom. It was like
Mm,
really impressive people do that. And your father's voice came in to say, you're not that important, you're not that impressive, right? So
mm,
I had to unwind this. And I read this book called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, and she's
mm,
talking about writing. But this was the epiphany for me. She said, if you're going to be a writer, you have to be militantly on your own side.
mm.
And it was just like, oh man, did I miss a lesson in life? I've never been militantly on my own side. And it was just like, like fireworks going off. It's like, why would you ever be against yourself?
Mm.
Why would you not be your best personal advocate? Right? I mean, the world is harsh. And so there's a woman named Kristen Neff you're probably familiar with, and she's
Yeah.
written a book on this. I read it, and it was like, I didn't need to read the book, even though it was very, very helpful for many, many people, because I had been so self-harming and self-critical for so long, that when I read you need to be militantly on your own side, it was like just like instant epiphany. It's like, what a mistake that I would allow myself to be this harsh on
Mhm.
myself and self-judging. It's not unreasonable to say, I didn't do that very well. I could have handled that better. I really don't know how to do this very well, and I need to work on that. But you
Mhm.
can do that in a centered place, in an objective, non-judging place, as opposed to, speaking in the vernacular, you don't know how to do this, so you're a piece of shit for not knowing how to do this, right?
Right.
And that's sort of the voice that I carried through for a very long part of my career. So I was a part of being a super achiever was motivated by an unwillingness to fail. Like, I don't ever want to experience whatever it was that got me that negativity in my life. So I'm just going to excel. So all I get is praise, right? All of this ties into what we were talking about if you know yourself, you're not going to be self-critical. You're not going to allow things that happened to you 20 years ago continue to, Wayne Dyer famously said, don't let the wake drive the boat. And like, that's pretty much what this is about. It's like, be centered and understand yourself well enough that you can operate from who you choose to be versus who you are with all these hidden wires that are inside of you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we could do a whole episode or two just on self-compassion, one of my favorite topics here, and I will just, point out, of course, that, as the research from Kristen Neff and others indicate, that self-compassion, despite maybe our gut instinct about it, is not complacency. And you pointed this out as well, right? It's like it's actually fully sitting with the experience and emotion of a setback. Again, being kind to yourself like you would a close friend, not talking shit to yourself. and then
Yeah.
and then actually that gives you more capacity to figure out what you need to do to change, because you're not beating yourself up about it, right? You've given yourself grace, and now I can figure out a path forward. And again, coming back to something I feel very strongly about, it's like when we learn to even just like ourselves, be on our side, we're much more likely not to have to protect our ego in certain relational dynamics, right?
All relational dynamics, all of them, right? I mean, we're
All of them.
talking about leadership, but you realize, I mean, you have interactions with people, and you're like, what was that about?
Mhm.
Like, right? Where you're just like, whatever the response was to this experience, this doesn't match up to what the experience should have brought out in you. So what's really going on inside of that person? And a lot of people are still working through, I'll tell you, I've never really discussed this, but
Mm.
so remember the brother that died?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, He was one of the most interesting people that I've ever known. He had the most remarkable sense of humor. He was really, really smart. Got an MBA from Columbia. Really smart guy, but very sensitive. And my father did the same thing to him. So he was 15 years older than I was. And so, in his experience growing up, my father was very, very critical of him. But um, it hurt him. I mean, it hurt me too. Don't get me wrong, but it hurt him so deeply
Mm,
that he never got over it. And so when a coroner and I had a conversation, I said, "Should I go to his house?" And she goes, "What for?" And I said, I don't know. I mean, I'm just sort of
mm,
working through this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do."
mm,
And I said, "Well, can I just ask you a question? Was alcohol impacting this?" And she said, "Let's just say all of his organs had been shut down.
mm,
So he basically drank himself to death."
yeah,
And I'm sad to say that I never realized how deeply harmed he was. And so what I'm saying is that, in severe situations, like he could have gotten over this if he had gotten some help and was aware of it. But if you
mm,
just keep going every day and you're not really taking a reflection and saying, is this helpful? Is this helping me? Is this, can I navigate in a different direction to make myself have a healthier, happier life?
mm,
So he never did that work. And so I'm saying, do the work.
yeah,
Figure out who you are. Know yourself. Know your values. Know what you stand for. Because, and you just alluded to this, and it will speak to it specifically to leadership. But if somebody comes to me that just had a major setback, even if it's harming me too, because they work for me, like they missed a goal or they lost a sale or they said something to an employee that they now regret, whatever, I'm going to be in a much more compassionate and helpful space to
mhm,
help them navigate that and get out of it so that they're whole, so that they can go back to doing good work, as opposed to somebody who hasn't done it, who's then reflecting on themselves, going through the same experience, being self critical, and then applying it to them, going, well, what the hell was that?
mm,
Who told you to do that? And you just make things worse. And you're the worst person for that person in that moment. So
mm,
all this work that we do on ourselves translates into a much more positive experience that you have with people. And well-being is driven by how people feel. So how you make people feel is driven by who you are. That's why I'm asking people to do this work.
yeah. One of my takeaways was if I want to create an environment, a culture that fosters well-being, it's starting with my own well-being in a sense.
There you go. Well
Starting,
said. That's it.
yeah. Well, Mark, I know we don't have much time left here, and I was planning on spending a good amount of time talking about the belonging piece in your book, but this seemed like an important conversation for us to have. Would you just maybe we can prime the readers, for the chapter in the book, but would you briefly just touch on belonging as a driver of well-being? Maybe just share a few
So
thoughts on.
well, I'll just say that um so the idea of employee well-being being so important is just a cherry on the top of the work that I've been doing since I wrote Lead from the Heart. Like
Mm,
I've led this way. I've fostered well-being for my entire career, and I've seen the rewards. So what I've really spent most of my time doing, Ethan, is finding results and research and
mm,
evidence to prove what I already knew to be true, not the other way around. It's like I did this, I got this experience. You'll get this experience because of this.
mm,
And so, but the one thing that I think surprised me when I was writing the book was that the number one driver of well-being is our feelings of belonging.
mm,
And so obviously I needed to dig into what that meant. And that's actually a much more sophisticated thing that people interpret.
mm,
So belonging means that we feel connected to the people that we work with, that they like having us around, think we're smart, think we're valuable, treat us that way.
mm,
Um, but there's also, companies will like inadvertently, or leaders will create competition within teams.
mm,
So you and I are pitted against each other. And, every month it's like, well, Mark kicked Ethan's ass again. The 3 months in a row, he's outperformed Ethan. Well, it turns out that that's really a very bad thing to do,
mhm,
because now I look at you as I want to beat you a fourth month, so I'm going to do everything I can to keep you from succeeding. And you're looking at me as a threat.
Hmm.
And so, why would you want to work on a team where either a threat to somebody or somebody that you want to beat? So if you want to compete against, the world, compete against, another company, or compete against the goal that you have.
Or
So
yourself,
let's,
yeah.
you know, let's focus on something that we can all achieve together, kind of a thing. That's much more meaningful. Because the reason is that if belonging is the number one driver of well-being, and we create an incentive program that motivates people to undermine each other, which you read about Microsoft doing that exact thing, it translated into talented people leaving in droves, and a company that stock performance didn't improve for 10 years because people found that to be the most toxic, undermining place to work. And so I think the big picture, just to sort of punctuate it for your audience, is to say, do whatever you can to build a highly cohesive team where people have each other's backs. It's so powerful. And that means if you've got people from different races or different sexuality or religions, or New York versus New Jersey, I'm not being, it's like we if you're not welcoming all those people and letting people be who they are with all their peccadillos, instead of focusing on their strengths, if you're focusing on, well, that guy, he went to some junior college, or whatever we do to sort of dismiss people, you're undermining belonging. So if you've hired people into your team, or you have people working on your team that you inherit, and they're talented, then do whatever you can to make sure that those people feel that they are welcome for who they are, and don't tolerate anybody on the team saying otherwise. So if you're going to work for Mark Crowley, you're going to work on a team where we take care of each other. We share ideas. If you succeed at something, you're going to share what you did to do it so that we can help everybody else. We're
Yeah.
not competing each other. We're looking out for each other, and we're going to share the experience. So you're focusing on the team success more than you're focusing on the individual success, so that no person could come in and think that they're the star and they're the reason why the team is excelling. It's not to say that you don't reward people who are doing great work. You do.
Yeah.
It's just the orientation is so much more effective when people feel like they get up every morning and they're like, I trust that guy.
Yeah.
I know he has my best interest at heart. So you have to actively cultivate this. It doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll say this, and then we'll land the plane here. Of just like you said right there, and alluded to a couple times, it's like this doesn't happen by accident. So I'm a big believer in teams creating common commitments, is what we call them. Like, here's how we want to show up with each other. Here's how we want to behave. And so many teams going around hoping this stuff happens, but nobody actually sat down as a team and said, what are our group common commitments? And having belonging being a key thread in those common behavioral commitments, I think it's going to go so far. And in the chapter in the book, you have other great recommendations on creating belonging. You talk about creating rituals and things of that nature. Um, but Mark, thank you. And I just want to say again, this is a beautiful gift you've given the world with this book. I highly recommend this book. I want to get this book out into as many leaders' hands as possible. And if listeners of this podcast want to help with that, I think maybe one of the best ways to do that is leave a review on Amazon of the book. That helps spread the word, helps more people see the book. Um, but last question for you. Um, if our listeners and me could only walk away with one thing we're going to remember from this conversation, what would you hope that would be?
I've done 173 episodes of my podcast over the last 7 years,
Mm.
and every one of them I end with the same message, which is love your people.
Mhm.
And it's binary. And as I was writing the book, I obviously know this, but I literally said in the book, if, like, stop reading this book if you're not interested in seeing other people thrive. Like if that doesn't get you excited, then this book isn't for you. And by the way, leadership isn't for you. It's like go be an individual contributor. And we know that the far majority of people in this world are much more interested in their own growth, their own financial situation, their own recognition themselves, right? Not a problem. That's it's just that if that's your principal motivation and you're actually even unhappy or not interested when other people are exceeding, what their potential is and meeting goals and growing and getting promoted and having fulfilling experiences, then don't be a leader because people feel whether or not you love them. And that's the difference. And so when we use I use the word care as a proxy, but at the end of the day, what people feel when they know their manager cares about them is love.
Mm.
And we don't need to be "I love you, man" or hugging people or any all the fantasies that people have to diminish this.
Yeah.
It's really what human beings need every single day. We want to know that we're loved. And
Yeah.
if you just show people that, hey, I hired you, I value you, I'm going to help you grow. You tell me what it is you're trying to achieve. I'll help you get there. You help me meet goals, and that's the win-win. But it comes down to just showing people that you're not just there because I hired you to hit a goal and I don't really give a shit about the rest of your life. I don't care anything about you. If people feel that you don't know anything about them beyond what they're here to do, they don't care. Like they stop caring. And when people stop caring, you're never going to get the best out of people. So love you, people.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Managers, leaders, you are in a position to actually help people have better lives. And I think that's a really cool thing. Mark, where can people find more about you, learn more about you?
When I wrote the book, there apparently was another Mark Crowley out there, so I had to add the C. So I'm Mark C. Crowley forever for the rest of my life. So on LinkedIn, Mark C. Crowley, my website, markccrowley.com, and of course Amazon for the books.
Amazing. We'll link to all of that in the show notes. Mark, again, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the awesome conversation. And yeah, you take care.
Thank you for inviting me, Ethan. Great to see you.
All right. Bye now.
Take care. Bye bye.